Coaching carousel madness. Today, I would rather be Jon Sumrall going to Florida than Lane Kiffin going to LSU.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network out there. It's all coaching carousel talk today. Jonathan Smith has been fired. Alex Golesh and Ryan Silverfield hired to the SEC. There are so many thoughts, and I'm going to cram them into today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So Lane Kiffin makes it official on Sunday, not Saturday, which is when I was expecting the news to come down. It's when Marty Smith at ESPN was waiting for the news to come down. I don't know how long he was on campus, but he probably knows the ins and outs. He's probably got a personal Marauders map of the Ole Miss campus at this point. It seemed like he was there so much. But Lane Kiffin is bolting. He will not coach the pending home playoff game for Ole Miss. He wants to take his staff with him. Things are getting uglier and uglier. Meanwhile, Jon Sumrall was a late surge to Florida. They make that hire. South Florida's Alex Golesh winds up going to Auburn. Thoughts on him coming later. Here's why I would rather be Jon Sumrall at Florida. The spotlight and intensity at Florida is very real. It is incredibly, the pressure for Florida to be a winner again is riding the athletic director's job, his job is riding on that working. There are a lot of fans that are tired of waiting for Florida to be what they've always supposed to be. It does not compare to the amount of pressure that Lane Kiffin is under going to LSU. Ole Miss is having the greatest season in the history of its program. Lane Kiffin, and you can readily make the case that LSU is a better job than Ole Miss. I'm fine with that. That's clearly the calculation that Lane Kiffin made. Because at Ole Miss, they were ready to commit. They made him a sizable offer. They have been invested in winning. They have had their best seasons in the history of their program with him at the helm. He had everything he needed at Ole Miss to go out and win a national championship. Maybe it wouldn't have been this year, but tell me what Ole Miss is missing. Can they acquire talent at a high level? Yeah, I watch them dominate the portal every year. Maybe they don't have the same high school recruiting potential, but can you build a roster at Ole Miss that is capable of contending for a national championship? Yes. If you can do that, you have to give it as many tries as you can, and eventually maybe you win one. He gave that up because he thinks it's much easier to win at LSU than it is at Ole Miss. And there's some truth to that. But if it doesn't work, you're done. Lane Kiffin's done. Coaching at the highest level. He will never be welcome back to Oxford, ever. Because he chose to leave. He wasn't forced to leave. This was not going from FAU to Ole Miss, where it's such a sizable step up. It's a step up. It's not in a completely different class. You know how I know that? Ole Miss beat LSU this year. This is a different college football world than the one of the last 10, 20 years. This is a world of college football with the transfer portal and NIL, and things have evened themselves out. And Lane wants to make this decision. Okay. He has been a head coach for so long at USC, going back to his time at Tennessee, very briefly in the NFL. He's been around for so long. If this doesn't work, what major program wants to deal with a complete and utter mercenary again? Who wants to? LSU obviously does because they are all in. And I respect that. I respect places in the collegiate or pro ranks that go all in, but say, you know what? Let's be fully committed to winning, because what other approach should you be taking? So LSU is all in. Pressure to win there, very real. But for Lane Kiffin specifically, if it doesn't work out at LSU, what major program? He could get another head coaching job. I don't think it would be at a place as good as Ole Miss. So I'd rather be Jon Sumrall today. Jon Sumrall is going to be the head coach at Florida. And you know what? I think this is a good hire. I think both these are good hires, by the way. I think LSU just has a lot more pressure behind it. So Jon Sumrall has made, get this, 4 straight conference championship games. Hasn't won them all. But he made back-to-back with Troy in the Sun Belt. He made back-to-back with Tulane in the American. I'm very happy, by the way, that Eric Morris at North Texas, who's going to Oklahoma State, and Jon Sumrall at Tulane are going to coach their team through the playoff. I'm glad that's happening. I feel for Ole Miss fans that Lane Kiffin isn't doing that. Even if you really don't like the guy, you would rather he coach Ole Miss through the playoff. Because now, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think Ole Miss should be punished one bit because the players accomplished this season just as much as Lane Kiffin did, and he knows that. And whether or not you believe the statement he put out where he said, I wanted to do this, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I think there's part of him that absolutely did, but man, I think Ole Miss got tired of being yanked around, and they want to go find a guy that actually wants to be there. And maybe whoever gets the interim tag winds up being the head coach one day. We'll see. We'll see how that all shakes out. So I don't think their coaching candidate list is limited to Pete Golding, their defense coordinator. But Jon Sumrall was trending and was discussed about as the leader for the Auburn job for a really long time. The problem for Auburn there is Florida's a better job. So they came in, they gave him a pretty good amount of money, starting at $7.5 million, and I like this hire a lot. It is really easy. I'm not a huge LeBron James fan, but I respect LeBron James as a basketball player because it's kind of hard to not do that unless you let the personal seep over into the professional judgment of his entire career. You heard this term a lot, LeBron fatigue. There's LeBron. It's a real thing. Very real thing. It's not limited there. It's just the most high-profile example in sports. I think there was an aspect of Jon Sumrall fatigue that he'd been talked about for such a long time. We forgot why he was an early candidate for all of these jobs, why his name was thrown around, why he's probably interviewed at several spots in this cycle before ultimately landing at Florida. The dude is a really good football coach. And Florida fans might be having some PTSD of taking a group of 5 coach from the state of Louisiana. It didn't work out last time. Guess what? If you connect those dots and say Jon Sumrall is not the right hire, can't believe they did this, you are being foolish. I have seen coaches work as first-time head coaches that were formerly Power 4 coordinators. I've seen coaches work that came from other Group of 5 schools, from Group of 5 schools not as high profile as Tulane for the last couple of years. I've seen head coaches work their way up, get a job, fail, and then go back and succeed at a different place once they get another opportunity. Think Barry Odom, who's at Purdue after succeeding at UNLV, where Dan Mullen is in the Mountain West Championship game. His team's at 10-2. There is not one path. There's not one structure in the coaching world that automatically produces great head coaches. Guys either have it or they don't. Jon Sumrall is a completely different guy than Billy Napier. And if your take on him, it's just another Billy Napier. It's just, that's a foolish way to look at it. So I'm going to grade all these hires on today's show. I give Lane Kiffin an A, that LSU got it done. I really do. Because if he can win at Ole Miss, there's no reason he shouldn't win at LSU. The biggest obstacle right now feels like blocking out all the noise and keeping things football oriented. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles that Lane Kiffin is going to have, to settle things down. Once that happens and football is actually played in Baton Rouge, where he's the head coach and play caller, yeah, I think he can have a lot of success. And he was the top candidate for any of these jobs for a reason. He's clearly a really good coach. So I give that an A. I give Jon Sumrall an A. But today, I would much rather be Jon Sumrall. Because if he doesn't work out at Florida and he's gone in 3 years and the Gators are having to go through this again, Jon Sumrall can go get another job like James Franklin did going to Virginia Tech. Jon Sumrall would probably be able to land a Power 4 job almost immediately. His coaching career wouldn't be over. Lane Kiffin, at the highest level of coaching in college football, I think he's done after LSU. Unless it's a rousing success and he decides he wants to leave, I think this is it. If this does not work, Lane Kiffin probably won't be the head coach of a major program again. Depending on how you define major program. I'm talking a top tier brand in Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, those sorts of schools. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. I'm sure you guys will have plenty. It's all, you can hit me up on Twitter as well at LockedOn_CFB. It's all coaching on today's show. This is the wildest, the carousel's not done. It's not done. UCLA is still open. Penn State is still open, but Auburn is not. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. That's before I was born. And with 48 teams, for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets, usually the hardest part. That's why Game Time is so clutch. The Game Time app is what you need to get, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hand and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. I've used Game Time to go to sporting events and comedy shows. I have saved money every time. I've had a great process every single time. Game Time's what you want to use. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. DJ Durkin had a chance. Going into the Vanderbilt, Mercer, and Auburn games, if he had gone 3-0, I think he would have been hired as the Tigers head coach. Instead, kind of out of left field, I wasn't super tied into this, but all of a sudden, Alex Golesh, who has done a phenomenal job at South Florida, is announced as Auburn's head coach. I like this hire. I do. I give this a B+. I think Alex Golesh has just as much of a chance to succeed at Auburn as really any of these hires do at their respective spots. And keep in mind, the odds that every coach I talk about today work out are not very high. And I think it's literally a coin flip as to whether Golesh is going to succeed at Auburn and stop the heartbreak that the Tigers fan base has been enduring for the last several years, or whether it will just continue and Auburn fans will begin, or probably continue, to feel like they are just cursed in this regard. But Golesh is a guy who's got SEC experience. He's a Josh Heupel. I didn't want to use just the worst rhyme, but he's a Josh Heupel disciple. it's just I don't know. Acolyte, does that work? Which was not a very good TV show, by the way. But he's got experience in the conference, and he took over a South Florida program that, remember, was in the absolute bottom of the American, which, as we know, is a good conference. You realize who was just coaching in the American, and the league will be happy to tell you because they put out a graphic with all this. I don't think it's ridiculous to say, hey, look at the caliber of coaches we just had in this league. But Eric Morris is going to Oklahoma State from North Texas. Alex Golesh is going to Auburn from South Florida. Jon Sumrall is going to Florida from Tulane. And then there's one more that I'm missing there. I'll just find the graphic real quick. But I think that the conference putting that out was kind of funny, but it was also kind of like, well, so you're showing that you're a league that and Ryan Silverfield went to Arkansas, who I'm about to talk about. So be good if I remember that. Anyway, those four coaches were just in the league at the exact same time. They're not all going to work, but they're all pretty darn good head coaches. Anyway, bringing this back to Golesh, I gave this a B+. Now, he turned around South Florida, and that was a much tougher coaching job than winning at Auburn, because Hugh Freeze figured out the off-the-field stuff, aside from bringing in the right quarterback and, being able to develop one on the field. The off-field stuff is there because the ability to acquire talent, we know is sufficient. We know Auburn is capable of doing that. That expectation for Golesh immediately, I think is going to be pretty high. The question is what happens on Saturdays. He went to South Florida, a program that had not been heard from, spoken of, or seriously discussed for most college football fans probably since 2007, when they were legitimately in the national championship discussion in the BCS. What a time it was. The program in the 3 years before he got there was 4-29. That's not good. That's 3, 4, yeah. It was bad. It was bad. They were 4-29. He got there, went 23-15, including 9-3 this year. Beat Florida earlier this season, a team that had far more talent on the field than his South Florida team had. And I think that's something that has to be really encouraging if you're an Auburn fan, is that he has shown. Now, is Billy Napier a great head coach? We know that that isn't the case. Still, he won an SEC game this year with a group of 5 roster. Auburn, correct me if I'm wrong, has also won just the one SEC game this year. So do I think he can succeed? Yes, I do. I think there is a high expectation for what he can do off the field and bringing in talent. But with this roster, and roster retention is going to be a big subject of conversation, and how the staff works out. Do they keep DJ Durkin as defensive coordinator and all that? Those are all really interesting conversations for the Auburn program to try to figure out in the next several weeks. But I think there should be a pretty immediate expectation of getting Auburn to a certain level. Now, let's let the offseason play out before we put a number on, well, Golesh should be able to do this. But the rebuild that he just did at South Florida, I don't think he's coming in to nearly as bad of a situation at Auburn. Does he need to figure out the quarterback? Yeah. Maybe he thinks Deuce Knight and Ashton Daniels should just battle it out. A young guy who's really talented and a veteran who just showed you he's kind of a gamer over the weekend. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe. Well, let's monitor that as we go. But yeah, I like Alex Golesh. So I give him a B+. I think it's a good move for Auburn. Now, moving to the other SEC job that got filled, Ryan Silverfield was a name that I mentioned a few times on this show, but overall was flying under the radar here. I'm giving this one a B-. Ryan Silverfield has been a head coach for a long time. He's won 29 games at Memphis over the last 3 years. During his tenure, has gotten them with a full season to finish inside the top 25 one time, which is no small feat when you're competing at the Group of 5 level. He does not have ties to the SEC, so it's going to be his first go-round in the conference. Maybe ignorance is bliss, or maybe he's not quite ready for it, and he's going to a place at Arkansas that is not one of the better jobs in the SEC. Now, if they could get some of their bigger brands like Walmart and Tyson Foods and those sorts of folks involved, it reminds me a lot of a job I'm going to talk about later on the show. Oregon State, I think CEO of NVIDIA or somebody at that company, which you may have heard something about in the last few weeks. He's an Oregon State alum, and I don't know, there's a pretty good example in the state of Oregon of an incredibly wealthy business executive taking an interest in a football program and it having some pretty good results. That team's going back to the playoff this year. Just throwing it out there. I'm going to get back to that. So, Ryan Silverfield, the reason I put this at a B-, I almost went C+. I just think Memphis is a good program that's been going up against some legitimately good teams and coaches over the last couple of years. He has not made an AAC championship game. He hasn't won one, but he's won a lot of games. Memphis in the American is, by comparison, a better job than Arkansas in the SEC. And the reason I give Golesh a higher grade at Auburn than Silverfield at Arkansas is there's a big jump. Is what Silverfield did at Memphis was worthy of consideration and getting a Power 4 head coaching job. It was not as impressive as what Golesh did at South Florida. And the guy who did the more impressive coaching job is walking into a better situation. So I am happy that Arkansas didn't settle for Bobby Petrino. I think they were interviewing him. He didn't win the games. So I am happy for their sake that they did not decide to settle on what would have been an easy hire, and you could have sold, well, they were close. Yeah. Okay. All right. The Scott Frost logic. Don't think that was ever seriously flying. So I like Ryan Silverfield. I think he can do well. What exactly is success at Arkansas? What is that job in the modern SEC? I don't know. That's my honest. I do not know if Arkansas is capable of ever making the college football playoff. I'll just say this: if you have made a truly home run hire, then he's a guy that will shift the perception of your program. Indiana is seen as a great program because they are a good team and a good job. Literally 2 years ago, they were none of those things. One coach can come in and change the entire identity and outlook of your football program if you made the right hire. Which of these guys do you think has done that? I don't think at LSU and Florida you can actually shift the perception as much. You can just accomplish what is supposed to be accomplished at those spots. But for Golesh and Silverfield, I put them in the same segment because I think they're closer together. I'd rather be at Auburn than Arkansas right now, without question. But is either as high caliber of a job as Florida or LSU? No. It's why they didn't get as high a grades for the coaches that I think were the two best guys really on the market right now. So B- for Silverfield, but a B+ for Alex Golesh. I think both could succeed. The question becomes for the fans, what is success and how long are you willing to wait for it? Some places are just not willing to wait. I've got my lowest head coaching hire grade of the cycle to hand out, but I've got a really exciting one too. And oh, look, another Big Ten job is open. First, this episode brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift. And Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. So when you order steaks from anywhere, even if you get them at the grocery store, what do you want? What Omaha Steaks is able to give you. They've got incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier, which I'm all about. I'm really busy this time of year. Meal prep is the best. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com. Promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. Check them out at omahasteaks.com. I mentioned earlier in the show, I have seen coaches from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of experience levels work out. The most unique hire, or one of the most unique hires of this cycle, is in Corvallis, Oregon. Jamarcus Shephard was the wide receivers coach at Alabama, at Washington before that, on staff with Kalen DeBoer. He is the new head coach at Oregon State. Now, they were looking at a couple of different candidates here. The Montana State head coach, Brent Vigen, don't actually know how to pronounce that. It'd be tough to be compared to the meatless diet all the time if that was how it's pronounced. But he's at Montana State, really good head coach, really good. They looked at the North Dakota State head coach. Then he got extended. They looked at Justin Wilcox, who just got fired from Cal. They land on Jamarcus Shephard. Now, I understand the upside of Jamarcus Shephard seems very great, which I'll get to in a moment. Oregon State is taking a gamble here. He has not been a head coach before. Now, Trent Bray, he was on staff with Jonathan Smith, who we'll talk about in just a moment. He was the easy hire because you were trying to keep something together. You needed to make a move, and no one really knew what the job was. Oregon State in the New World Pac-12 is a better caliber job relative to the rest of its conference than it was in the old Pac-12. when Jonathan Smith built them up to be a top 20 team in 2023. So Jamarcus Shephard is getting his first chance to be a head coach. And there's absolutely a possibility that he isn't there in a couple of years. This hire reminds me very much of Fran Brown at Syracuse, who just had a really bad season. They only won 3 games. They got they got injured at quarterback, Steve Angeli. Fran Brown's a really good head coach. And so he too, I believe, was a position coach before he got hired to Syracuse, which is not traditionally a huge brand. He went there coming from the SEC, and he won 10 games in his first year. I'm not telling Oregon State fans that's what's going to happen. The upside of Jamarcus Shephard is that every time I talk to somebody about this guy, it's rave reviews. I've had a couple different people tell me that. His background has ties to the West Coast. He's been at a high-level program in Alabama, worked under a really good head coach in Kalen DeBoer, and this is kind of a cherry on top. Maybe he brings a few Alabama transfers when that portal window opens in January. Maybe. Just maybe. So I think there's a lot of upside to Jamarcus Shephard, who feels, again, a bit like Fran Brown, like an energy culture guy who you're taking a bit of a swing on. And he stood out to me from the other candidates in this search because he didn't have as much experience. And there was a situation with Vigan, the Montana State head coach, about he flew into Portland, he interviewed, all that stuff. It came back to Jamarcus Shephard, and I don't think this is a settle sort of move. This is a guy who reportedly interviewed incredibly well, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest, and I think can go there and succeed. And yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. And you're taking a little roll of the dice by hiring another first-time head coach. But if Jamarcus Shephard and Trent Bray, before they were head coaches, interviewed, I suspect that Jamarcus Shephard would have been hired. Bray made sense at the time, started out well. He was 4-1 through his first 5 games as head coach. After that, I think went 1-11, something in that regard. So this is a start from scratch. And even if just a few players from Alabama come from Tuscaloosa to Corvallis, I think that alone could invigorate some fans that are struggling to feel excited about college football right now. So going forward in the New World Pac-12, I think Jamarcus Shephard can work. I don't know how immediate it's going to be. That's going to depend on who he can bring in starting in January. And obviously he's got to assemble a staff. But how about this? Jonathan Smith out at Michigan State. Is this a little quick? Yeah, I actually think it is. And he's in year 2, and they regressed, without question. They got worse. Aiden Childs wasn't developing the way that he should. This was not a good day for Oregon State fans. The coach who left you gets fired the same time that you hire a new head coach that can inject new life into the program. So Beaver fans getting some good vibes, and boy, they haven't had very many of those in the last couple of years. And they got a house by Washington State on Saturday to boot. The Pac-12 championship in 2025, officially a tie, 1 win, 1 loss apiece. Yeah, anyway. So Jonathan Smith was very much in the mindset of any port in a storm when the Pac-12 was collapsing and I can't be at Oregon State and all. He would have been better off to stay. He would have had a lot more leeway. He would have had an easier path to winning football games. He moved into the new Big Ten knowing, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA are coming along. And by the way, he's lost to all of those teams since going there, and just about everybody else. They picked up their first win of the season in Big Ten play against Maryland. Yeah, that should not have been enough to save his job if you were that close. And it of course wasn't. I actually felt like this was a year too early, because you decided to move on this late in the cycle. You're playing musical chairs, and look how many chairs are empty. Not very many. So I don't like what this says about the judgment of the Michigan State coaching staff. Let's let him finish it. He won the game, and then you fired him. If that's the case, you should have either fired him or said you were keeping him like Wisconsin did with Luke Fickell, which had some good results, by the way, towards the end of the season. They started playing much better football. You should have done one of those two things. Now, Jonathan Smith is the one mostly responsible for Michigan State's failures in the last couple of years. He's owed over $30 million, by the way, to not coach at Michigan State. So now you've got a couple of coaches in the last couple cycles for Michigan State, or at the school, that you're paying big buyouts to. And I know the Mel Tucker situation, not what I'm here to discuss. I don't know that I love what's going on with their decision making here, because I think you need to give a head coach 3 years. And yeah, Jonathan Smith went backwards in year 2. It was not good. It was really, I thought they might be a bowl team this year. They were not. They won 4 games. They should have been able to win at least 6. That's all he needed. He didn't have a flag planting win, but he just needed to make a bowl game. He would have been able to stick around. With their schedule, they should have been able to do it, even though it was really difficult. So I get that. But now look at the number of candidates that you're going to, and it seems like they're going to go hire Pat Fitzgerald. That's what the indications are. The former Northwestern head coach who cleared up his off-field situation and cleared himself of wrongdoing in that whole situation that led to his firing at Northwestern. And look, Pat Fitzgerald is a very liked and well-respected guy. If he winds up being the hire, I don't know. It's not splashy. Not every great hire is splashy. Kurt Signetti wasn't. It was just a good hire. I just get bad. The timing, the decision, I just wonder. I don't know. I've got red flags going up in my head about that Michigan State situation. That just felt like it was very reactionary, but not reactionary enough. And I think they should have given him one more year. But Oregon State fans probably happy to have a head coach they're excited about, while their former head coach isn't. That, by the way, Jamarcus Shephard, I give him B- only because he's not proven. I strongly suspect that he'll have some level of success. But when you're a new head coach, there are always bumps. You can look across the way in Eugene. Dan Lanning, I think we all agree he's pretty good going to the playoff for a second straight season. He's won 24 games in the last 2 years. That's a lot. Go back to his first year. Had some serious bumps. And at Oregon, that's different than what bumps and bruises look like at Oregon State. Still, B- there. If I were Michigan State, I'd try to go get Willie Fritz at Houston, if you could. They're in my top 25 this week. You can check that out on Twitter at @LockedOn_CFB. So, my lowest graded coaching hire is Tavita Pritchard at Stanford. Now, I think what Andrew Luck is going for here is the Jed Fish hire, who was a quarterbacks coach in the NFL with the Patriots and the Rams, and I don't know that he was actually full-time play caller there. This, again, is not a splashy hire. This is Andrew Luck, who I'm fully supportive of him being around that program and him trying to implement a new version of Stanford football that gets back to winning. I'm here for it. I really am. I've grown up with Stanford having great seasons my whole life, and I would love to see him get back to being good. And in the ACC, they can climb. Pritchard was a longtime Stanford assistant. He's been in the NFL the last couple of years, quarterback coach with the Commanders. There's Jed Fish upside here. I don't think this is the upside I'm going to give Stanford hiring Tavita Pritchard. When Arizona hired Jed Fish, I had the same sorts of reservations. Like, really? Maybe I just need to get off my high horse and trust Andrew Luck. Maybe. But he hired a guy who he knows. He hired a guy who is a Stanford guy. That's not the best reason to hire somebody. It's not. Maybe he's really good. Maybe he'll do really well. I wish him luck. But I give that a C-. So far, that's my lowest graded hire of the coaching carousel. More to come on tomorrow's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.